Happy launch day. Today is tax day, and we have just released the 19th edition of the ALEC Laffer State Economic Competitiveness Index, Rich States, Poor States. And we're here with some special guests, excited to do a deep dive into the rankings and find out who came in at number one. So to start off, I would like to introduce ALEC's Chief Executive Officer, Lisa Nelson. Lisa, talk to us a little bit about why Rich States, Poor States matters so much to the ALEC mission and also the impact. Who else has made such an impact helping us put this report together?
Well, April 15th is a dreaded day for many, many people, but not the people of Utah, because it reestablishes them as the preeminent state in the country for economic outlook and all of their productivity and their policies. On this launch day, when I think about 19 years of Rich States, Poor States, and our co-authors, Dr. Arthur Laffer and Steve Moore, along with Jonathan Williams here at ALEC, I couldn't be more proud of the product that every year we put together. It is our preeminent publication at ALEC and something that all the states use to compare themselves, to compete with each other, and to get that ranking in the top 10. The best part about our ranking is that the states do compete. And President Adams, I've seen you go back and forth with speakers of the House and presidents of other states saying, what do we need to do to catch Utah by the tail? So we couldn't be more proud of this publication. And today on April 15th, it gives us great pleasure to bestow that number one ranking again on the state of Utah.
Fantastic. Jonathan, as ALEC's president and chief economist and one of the co-authors of this report, give us a quick snapshot of what goes into our economic outlook rankings and why Utah has been able to stay on top this year.
Well, that's a great question. Utah stays at number one. I'll answer the second part first because it's commitment year in and year out to good policy and doubling down on success and never letting other states catch them. I mean, that's part of the great race of competition across our 50 laboratories of democracy, as we know, is that states can fall behind by standing still, as we often say. The great thing about Utah is with leaders like President Adams and Majority Leader Cullimore, they're not going to give up. They're not going to stand still. And as all the other states are trying to make gains, we've seen some states over the years with impressive gains, like North Carolina, for instance, like Indiana, states that have moved from middle of the pack to top tier. Ohio sees a huge jump this year because of the efforts of Senate President Rob McCauley. Those efforts are underway, but Utah always stays ahead of the competition because they never stop moving ahead for free market policy. Now, what do we measure? We look at things that matter. We look at 15 different factors that taxes, labor policy, regulations, things that matter for economic growth. They're things that our co-author, the great Arthur Laffer, has studied for more than 50 years. And there are things, two reasons why we choose them. One is we know they matter for economic growth, and they're among the most important things that states can do to make themselves growth states. But secondly, and more importantly for the senators here on this discussion with us today and legislators across America, is there factors that every single state legislator in all 50 states directly control for better or for worse. They're not these variables that are amorphous. I mean, they're things that tangibly affect the growth, the prosperity of families, businesses, and individuals all throughout the states.
That is great. And we're here with Senate President Stuart Adams, who has served as an ALEC National Chairman. You're a member of the ALEC Board of Directors, and it's really exciting to have you here at the ALEC headquarters here in our nation's capital. We often have celebrated this in Salt Lake City, but tell us how you've managed to do it. You've been on top for 19 years in a row now.
Well, it's great to be here in Washington, D.C., a very exciting day. As I think about the principles that have kept Utah great, and we do compete, and we compete very well, and that's part of what makes America great, is the fact that we compete, we understand capitalism, we understand what drives economy, and we cut taxes, income tax again, 6 years in a row now, again. And we can, but more important than tax cuts, I think it's our regulatory policy. And Elisa's right, and Jonathan's right. we look at other states and we keep learning from them. They're going to catch us. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep with our regulatory policy. And when you look at what that means, it just isn't about being number one, but it's about the results. And one thing rich states, poor states does, and Art Laffer, and with the Laffer curve, and Steve Moore and Jonathan Williams, they don't look at history. They don't look at our performance. They look at the future. So the regulatory policies, what drives the future growth. And again, people can predict, but outcomes are what we're after. And you look at the outcomes of Utah, we got the number one GDP growth. We just had a rating come out. I don't know who did it in the United States, but they looked at average family income. And we looked at what it was in the 70s, and we look at what it is today. Utah's average median family income was in the $55,000 range in the 70s. Today, 95,000.
Wow.
And what we have now is families that can afford to go to Disney World, Disneyland to actually enjoy a quality life. But that is what happens from good regulatory policy and putting together the principles of limited government and free markets. We're going to continue to compete well. We're going to continue to make sure Utah's great. But I believe passionately that America is the hope of the world. I mean, what we've done in America, no other country can compare to it. But Utah is going to continue that American dream and making not only America, but Utah great. And it's been a great run. Thank you, ALEC, for the principles. Those principles, guiding principles, as we see and compete with other states, they're what drive not only Utah's economy, but I think the economy in the nation. So thank you.
Very well said. We'll go next to Utah Senate Majority Leader Kirk Cullimore. Just following on what President Adams said, I mean, how have you been able to accomplish this? Is this something that has happened by accident, or are you intentionally year after year pursuing policies to keep Utah on top?
Yeah, so I've been in the legislature for 8 years now and had the benefit of coming into the number one economic outlook, at 11 years at that time, or 12 years. And so I would say that it is something that we intentionally look at. We look at the metrics, we look at the things that are scored and judged by rich states, poor states, and we make intentional efforts to align our policies with those things that will continue to help us with the economic outlook. And so, like President Adams said, I mean, whether it's tax policy, we are continually trying to decrease the tax burden on Utah citizens. We're continually trying to decrease the regulatory environment for businesses so that we can see businesses thrive. And we want to invite businesses into Utah. And we've seen the fruits of that. And so coming into the legislature with Utah already on that trajectory has made it very easy to continue to grow on that. But despite it being easy and being in a good spot, it's something you continually have to work at. And we do deliberately talk about that and work on that.
Fantastic. Jonathan, going back to you, we talk a lot about states that fall behind by standing still on policy, but Utah's got a lot of great legislation in place, whether that's on property taxes or tracking federal dollars. I mean, what stands out in your mind when you look at Utah, how they have kind of separated themselves from the pack?
Well, how long do you have? Because it's going to be a lengthy answer. I'll try to summarize. It's essentially, when you look at the big picture things that Utah gets right, first of all, Utah doesn't get anything horribly wrong either. And that's a key element of how they've been able to stay at number one for so long, is most states do many things right and some things not so well. Utah does not do things poorly at all across the board. And then you double down on some of the big picture things that have become ALEC model legislation, for instance. So the flat tax, something that, in 2007, 2008 timeframe, when rich states, poor states was just starting, Utah was just transitioning to a flat tax and going away from a graduated progressive income tax to a single rate flat tax. Here we are a couple of decades later, and we've now had about a dozen states follow suit, because it's hard to argue with success. I mean, that's a huge element. Almost number one issue everywhere we go, as we talk with legislators today, is property tax burdens and how they're out of control. They're kicking seniors out of homes. They're stopping young families from buying their first home. Utah has been way ahead of the curve since 1985 with their truth in taxation law on the books that we then adopted as ALEC model policy to learn from the success of Utah. You go down the line, those are two big ones on taxes, but this huge problem of the states becoming too dependent on the federal government, where you have now some states that over 50% of their all funds budgets are coming from the federal government versus state sources. Utah's great plans in place that monitor those federal funds and look for ways to have contingency plans if and when the federal government reduces funds. You talk about pension reform. You keep going down the list. Utah's been a leader. And, folks, if you want to make your state more competitive, look at what Utah has done in so many of these great areas of ALEC model policy.
Well, Lisa, that state competition is something that we're so proud to foster and add some fuel to that fire. So when we put out a report like this, you see a lot of those competitive juices start flowing among ALEC legislators. How have you seen that play out during your time with the organization?
Well, it was just the intentionality. And Senator Cullimore talked about it, and Jonathan alluded to it. But every year, President Adams will take a look at what's happening around the country and then think about and actually hold meetings about. I recall bringing Dr. Laffer into Utah and having over 45 of your legislators in a room for upwards of about 4 hours, learning those principles, teaching the principles of free market kind of economics. And that intentionality, I think, it's engagement at ALEC. We've had our annual meetings at ALEC, and at the end of a grueling week of meetings and talks and lectures, what does Senate President Adams do? He calls together the Utah delegation on the Friday afternoon and says, okay, we heard all these good ideas. Now, how are we going to execute against them next year? So I would just say to all of our ALEC members and all of our state chairs and anybody listening that when you really stop a minute and think about that competition and think intentionally about what you want to try to achieve, if you think about the vision being number one for Utah and the strategy is to kind of abide by those guiding principles, the tactics are pretty easy. Work with ALEC, work with our team. Think about who you want to bring in for our briefings and educate your legislators so that you can pass that good policy. Of course, it helps to have a majority of free market thinkers in your caucus, but that competition is what makes ALEC come alive. And we love to honor Utah with this number one ranking.
Yeah, and I'd maybe just spin off of that because, as I look at what ALEC does, I mean, we may be number one, but we know we won't continue to be number one if we stand still because you see the growth, you see the principles that other states are using. And the great thing about ALEC is we do learn from other states. We pay close attention to what they're doing. And I don't care which state it is. If you have a good idea, we want to try to embrace it and try to follow that. But ALEC facilitates that. Yeah. As you come together as other legislators, we talk about ideas, things we're doing in other states, things that are working, things that are not. And that's again, a free market principle that actually keeps America great, but also keeps each of our states great. And, it's a simple principle as you think about it for a second. If you want to have tax revenue, who pays the taxes? People do, and businesses. And if you want to have a really strong economy, it's going to come back. And we've cut taxes over and over again, but we've also been able to raise our teacher salaries, do a lot of infrastructure work. But a strong economy allows you to do both. And it's a great principles that ALEC has taught, and it's an opportunity to share with other states. And I want the other states to know we're paying attention to what you're doing. We're watching, and hopefully you're watching what we're doing. And together we'll continue to make America the greatest country and continue to maintain that America is the hope of the world.
Very well put. And one thing to add here is, a core message of Rich States, Poor States is that Americans vote with their feet in favor of economic opportunity. And Utah in recent years has been one of, if not the fastest growing state in terms of population percentage. Senator Cullimore, with all of this growth that Utah has experienced, what have been some of the benefits that have come along with that? There may be some challenges associated with it too, but what are some of the benefits that you've seen to fostering that growth?
Yeah, well, success breeds success, right? And so we've seen our state grow, we've seen business grow. We've decreased taxes, and as we've decreased taxes, we've actually seen our revenues increase.
It's amazing.
Which allows us to then again decrease our taxes. And so,
what does Arthur Laffer say? That's not rocket surgery.
Yeah, that's right.
If he were here, he'd be talking about that. The Laffer curve is working in Utah.
That's right.
So we've got new businesses coming in. The challenge, I guess, which is better than the challenge of a declining economy, the challenge is affordability, and that's one of the number one concerns in Utah. And when I look at some of the challenges across the country, I would say that's a challenge I would pick, because that means we're growing into our state, and there's demand for the state, and the social ills that come with the declining economy are not problems you want to have. I'd rather be working on how can we continue to grow? How can we create more supply so that we meet the demands of our growing population and our growing economy? And so affordability is a real problem with this, and housing affordability in particular. But on the balance of challenges, it's one I would take over some of the other problems that I see with our colleagues across the countries that have economies that are not performing as well.
Yeah, good insights. And Jonathan, as we start to wrap this conversation up, closing thoughts from you. I mean, what do the rest of the 49 states need to understand about these brand new rankings and lessons that we can learn from the Beehive State?
Well, I mean, I think, the big lesson is following the principle-based approach to policymaking, as President Adams just outlined and Lisa just talked about. That is key. It also takes principled leaders to implement the principles, right? I mean, it's a two-part piece, that it takes leaders that will work with their caucuses to bring them to consensus around these principles. But I mean, the proof is in the pudding, as we like to say. I mean, Americans are voting with their feet. They're voting very strongly towards states like Utah, like Texas, like Florida, like Tennessee, like North Carolina, the states that follow these principles, the ALEC principles, that's formula that works. And you look at the other side of the equation, New York being 50th out of 50, having those goalposts. What do they have in common on the other side? High tax rates are driving out their people. And guess what? They still have budget deficits after raising taxes. They still have affordability issues after they're hollowing out their population. And it got to a point where Governor Kathy Hochul of the state of New York just recently went down to West Palm Beach after losing, hundreds of big businesses over the years and small businesses. She says, please come back, bring your revenue back. We need your revenue. They basically want to be a charity case because they can't get it right on policy. So juxtapose that versus success breeding success, as Senator Cullimore said, in Utah and the free market states continuing to move forward. I mean, if there's anything today that we see across the map, it is a divide between states that want to be competitive and states that want to manage decline.
We'll go now to Senate President Adams and then Lisa for a final word.
Well, we talk about a lot about being number one and what it means, but what it means to me is I actually have 16 grandchildren, and I look at their future, and I look at the future that I want them to have. And that's what drives us. That's what motivates us. It isn't the number one rating, but we want them to have a very bright future. And in Utah, their future is bright because of the policy we put in place. We like competing with other states. We like making sure Utah is number one, but we're really competing on an international level. And we're going to make sure that Utah is number one, but America stays number one as we see what's going on around the world. It's really important that those limited government, free market principles that we know work allow competition to happen, not only in America, but continue to keep us competitive around the world. So it's exciting day for us. We're glad to be number one, and we're going to do our best to stay number one, but hopefully that isn't the goal. The goal is to try to make Utah and America the greatest spot on the planet, which I think we are and continue to be.
Well, it's an admirable goal, and we are very honored to have Utah back, and how appropriate to be here in Washington to tell them how to maybe treat their taxes. We're going to be going up to the Hill, I think, later today, and hopefully giving them a message. I will just say from all of us at ALEC how proud we are to be working with the state of Utah and to watch your continued growth. And we look forward to a great future ahead.
And when you go up there, Lisa, remind them that Utah does balance their budget.
Yes. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Lisa, for those insights and those comments, and Jonathan, you as well. And thank you, gentlemen, for coming all the way from Utah to be with us here in the nation's capital. That concludes this conversation. But if you want to do a deeper dive into the rankings, make sure you go to richstatespoorstates.org. Those are all live on our microsite. You can explore those. You can adjust your policies, see how you might be able to keep up with Utah. And I think based on what these gentlemen have said today, you're going to need some luck. You're going to need some hard work to do that. But thank you so much for joining us. Check out richstatespoorstates.org.